Good evening, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Our top story, police in Northern Ireland say they're now investigating a second data breach, this time the theft of documents relating to a stolen laptop. According to the force, a spreadsheet containing the names of more than 200 serving officers and staff was stolen from a private vehicle in the Newton Abbey area on July 6th. A police-issue laptop and radio were also taken. Earlier, the PSNI announced a critical incident after admitting that data revealing the details of thousands of police was briefly published online. A British man is among 5 people who've been shot dead in violent protests in South Africa. The 40-year-old, reportedly a doctor who was a tourist in the country, was killed in Cape Town last Thursday. It's believed that he'd taken a wrong turn when a group approached the vehicle and shot him. Unrest began after minibus taxi drivers announced a week-long strike. A surge in illegal people smuggling gangs is to be tackled by a new deal struck between the UK and Turkey. Under the agreement, the Turkish National Police will speed up the process of returning Turkish nationals who come to Britain via illegal channels. Turkey's often used as a major hub for people smuggling gangs due to its geographical location, and reports suggest that many vessels used to cross the channel originate there. Strikes by staff at Gatwick Airport will cause disruption during the bank holiday weekend as workers announce fresh walkouts. It's part of an ongoing dispute over pay. The Unite Union saying that around 230 workers, including ground handlers and those who assist passengers, will walk out for 8 days. The dates of those walkouts, 18th of August and then again from the 25th. Fewer homes are to be built by a major construction firm due to a sharp slowdown in the property market. Bellway told shareholders it expects completions to decrease due to weaker order numbers and low reservation rates. But there is some good news on the way for those with a mortgage. Several of Britain's biggest lenders have cut their interest rates today. Let's take a look at them. Nationwide, cut up to 0.55% off of its fixed-rate mortgages. TSB has slashed around 0.4% from selected 5-year fixed-rate products, and HSBC has cut rates on its residential mortgage range by 0.2%. Well, of course, the Bank of England's base rate is remaining at 5.25%. 41 migrants have died in a shipwreck off the Italian island of Lampedusa. Local media reports say that 4 people who survived the wreckage told rescuers they were on a boat that set off from Tunisia and sank on its way to Italy. It also said the boat that was carrying 45 people included 3 children. The Prime Minister of France has visited the site of a deadly fire that killed 11 people earlier on this morning. The blaze broke out at a holiday home for disabled people and was quickly extinguished by firefighters. President Emmanuel Macron described it as a tragedy. 11 dispersal orders have been issued by police on London's Oxford Street after social media posts encouraged people to steal from stores. The TikTok posts prompted a heavy police presence, and 2 young men were seen being led away in handcuffs. Some outlets shut their doors while crowds gathered and traffic was temporarily brought to a halt. A spokesperson for the Mayor of London told GB News anyone who's seen content encouraging them to commit crime should ignore it. Online medical company Babylon Health is at risk of collapsing unless it finds a buyer. Babylon's GP at Hand service is available 24 hours a day via your smartphone. It's funded by the NHS and became the first GP provider to build up more than 100,000 patients. The US-listed company has struggled after a business merger fell through. It says the UK part of its business is still successful and sustainable, but will struggle to continue unless a solution is found. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. Now let's get back to Michelle.
Thanks for that, Ray. I am Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight alongside me. I've got 2 of your favourites. You tell me who you like and I listen. PR consultant Alex Dean is here alongside him. The founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. Good evening, welcome,
Hello.
gents. You've got a suntan. Where have you been? Have you been on holiday?
Malta, where my wife's from. Very lucky to have been there, but I'm also very grateful to be back, but not for the weather.
Particularly on Dewbs and Co, you mean?
Particularly Dewbs and Co. The high energy of Dewbs and Co.
That is what we like, everybody, isn't it? What is on your mind tonight? I've got lots coming your way. I want to talk to you about greedy banks ripping us off with their interest rates, whether or not it's time to add a windfall tax to those guys. Social media, do you think it is enhanced society for the better or not? I think it's a scourge on society. If you disagree with me, do tell me why. I've got it all to come and more, so gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address, or you can tweet me at GBNews. We need to stop saying that because it's not called Twitter anymore. We need to be saying, like, you can X us. But that doesn't sound right, does it?
Sounds a little wrong.
Doesn't, yeah, it sounds like we've been in a really bad relationship and people just want nothing to do with us or something. It all sounds a bit weird, but whatever. If Twitter is still your thing, get in touch with me on there. But, you know, every single day, pretty much, there is a poll asking if there was a general election tomorrow, who would you vote for? I maintain I've never been polled in all my life. That has not changed recently, but notwithstanding that, these polls are coming in thick and fast. There is not a general election tomorrow, so I always take these with a pinch of salt, but it's getting to the point now where I cannot ignore the obvious, because Alex Dean, when you look across the spectrum at the different polls and who's conducting them, there does seem to be a common message, which is at a general election, the Tories would take quite a kicking and it would be Labour that would prosper. So I'm asking tonight a simple question. Do you think that the Labour Party is what we need to make Britain great again?
I certainly don't, and I can explain why, but let me just say a word on polling first. When you look at the data in the polls, and it's clear, as you say, that Labour has a lead in a poll of polls or across the data that you can see. But that lead isn't drawn from some enormous groundswell of new support for the Labour Party. It comes from a very large growth in the number of people who say they don't know how they're going to vote at the next election, who are then discounted from final figures saying what the final result should be. And people who say they don't know how they're going to vote are wildly disproportionately taken from those who voted Conservative in 2019. That is to say that the challenge for the Tory party is to get out its vote and to convince people that supported it last time that they should do so again. That's hard, but it's identifiable and it's doable.
Is it doable, do you think? So basically what Alex is saying, and I'll paraphrase, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically this is, a lot of it is to do with anomalies in the polls, and actually the Tories perhaps wouldn't be as battered as some are saying that they would be.
Well, I think the poll indicating 90 Conservative seats is probably very unlikely. I think worst case for the Conservatives is probably 150 seats, something like 1997, which is obviously still very bad. And it's important to say a majority of one for Labour would be extraordinary, given where they ended up in 2019. Going back to your question about would a Labour government be good for the UK, I think a Labour government would be less bad for the UK than the Conservatives. Now, I understand that's not a ringing endorsement. That might not get people, you know, running to the ballot box in May 2024, perhaps. And that's probably what the Conservatives are banking on. There is not this enthusiasm and energy behind Keir Starmer. But I have to say, I feel sorry for Conservative voters because it feels like they're being permanently gaslit by their own party. Boris Johnson funds LTNs. Now Rishi Sunak's looking into them. In 2019, they commit to net zero by 2050. Now they say they hate net zero. They said they'd get immigration down to the tens of thousands in 2010. Now it's net immigration 600,000 over the last 12 months. So on issue after issue, they create bogeymen. They say we have to do something about this. They're the ones responsible.
Yeah, but there's been a massive issue in between, which is called the global pandemic, which has altered the landscape hugely in various different places.
Well, I just think, and look, it's partly a function of being in power for so long, but I just think people aren't going to take them very seriously if they keep on doing this on immigration, on net zero, on LTNs. Look, it was their idea to have this prohibition on new petrol cars not being sold after 2030. That came from them. And now they're rallying against it. ULEZ. Initially proposed by Boris Johnson as London Mayor. Now they're making it this huge totemic issue because it's going to give them political capital.
Maybe it's called listening to the electorate. Maybe
that's one read on it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of issues that Aaron's just mentioned, and I don't want to disappear down one particular rabbit hole, but LTNs, when they were first mooted, were actually quite an empowering thing for local government, which is something I happen to believe in. I think we should give more authority at a lower level, I don't mean to sound hierarchical, at a local level where people can make more decisions about how their lives are run. Sadly, it seems in a lot of the examples, and I've just moved into Dulwich, which is crippled by LTNs. People are having to endure LTNs which aren't working. But on your thing about ULEZ, the ultra-low emission zones, which we're now seeing in a number of different cities, the ULEZ, as originally conceived for London, was really kind of central. It was like Monopoly board or less. It was really quite central around it. The expansion so quickly out into the outer boroughs, I mean, I would think most people on the real left wouldn't like it, because the people it punishes the most are people who haven't bought a vehicle in a while, ultra dependent on their vehicle for work, like going to the airport or doing things out of hours, the tradesmen and so forth, and cannot afford to trade up. So those people used to be core Labour voters, and the idea that you should kind of laugh it off when those are the people who suffer. No, I wasn't saying. I'm sorry, I wasn't saying you were. The idea that the Sadiq Khan should say, "Oh well, then it's only 1 in 10 vehicles, so forget about it." When that 1 in 10 is really drawn from people who can least afford to lose.
Yeah, and shift workers that span different days, for example, they'll get a hammering. You mentioned 2019, and some would say that actually one of the key differences between then and going forward would be the fact that Jeremy Corbyn is no longer the leader and instead being replaced by Keir Starmer. Do you think that Starmer would fare better? I mean, it's not, I was going to say fare better than Corbyn did, but I don't really think that's going to be very hard. But do you think that they're going to be better placed with Starmer as their leader?
Well, it'll be an interesting challenge if Keir Starmer can clear 40%, which is what Labour gets in 2017. I mean, if he doesn't, that is a failure, because a lot of people, like myself, can point the finger and say, well, actually, Jeremy Corbyn did better than you. I think on present trajectories, and again, it's a year away at least, he probably will clear 40%. I think, look, this is my suspicion, I think Labour get a healthy majority, and I think Keir Starmer won't do very much. He'll be very poor in the execution, and he'll become incredibly disliked very quickly. A bit like Francois Hollande in France after, the early 2010s. That's my read on things. And I think if you're an ambitious Conservative, that's what you're going to work with, rather than, oh, well, we can win next year because actually, we've got all the answers. Like I say, I think they've been so bad to their own electorate, their own base, for so long, I just think too many people are switching off.
So one of the things to say is to go to your first point, Michelle, about polls. The next election is a year away, and a lot can change in that time. The real poll that matters is when people go to vote. And of course, Thatcher famously in the 1980s, mid-term, was always miles behind in the polls, like much worse, even than this on some occasions, but really far behind. And would say, how far are we? Not far enough. We've got to keep going and convince people we're doing things in office. I also think what Aaron was saying, the comparison to 2019 is interesting. Because of the global pandemic, because of the invasion of Ukraine, because of the financial events we've seen around the world, people sometimes lose sight of how transformative a period this is politically, domestically in the UK. The big defining features of the last election were Boris, Brexit and Jeremy Corbyn, whatever you think of those. And net, they were all in favour of the Conservative Party. They encouraged people to vote Tory. And none of those are going to apply next time. You might argue, let's really finish off Brexit, might be there a bit. But the other two are obviously unambiguously gone, right? So it's very unusual to have a single parliament in which all the leitmotifs, all the main themes that dominate an election have changed completely by the time of the next one.
And I do think, actually, that I think the Corbyn, you'll probably disagree with me, but I think the Corbyn element did drive a lot of people that perhaps were not traditional Tories to the Tories in 2019. Do you think that's fair?
No, I think that, look, Corbynism in many ways was a failure. I saw a great article recently by a lady who used to work at The Economist, Anne McElvoy, and she said, Corbyn is like Farage. I said to myself, if only. Yeah. If only Jeremy Corbyn could do rebuttal and agenda setting like Nigel Farage, he'd be the Prime Minister. So I think there were lots of strengths, actually, with Corbynism. Its policy agenda on public ownership, a narrative potentially on reconstructing, rebuilding a nation, a national community. It couldn't do that for a bunch of reasons, many self-inflicted. And so I think the comparative advantages were never really jumped upon. But I think the core policies of rebuilding this country, making it a better place to live for everyone, I still think that's a very powerful one. And I frankly don't think that Starmer's going to build on that. I think Starmer is very much in the pocket of big business. He's talking about his dad being a tool maker and all these things. I don't want to hear your story, your hard luck story. I want to hear the story you're saying about the country. And And, you know, it's a shame, but I still think there's an appetite for that stuff.
Oh, I had no idea his dad was a toolmaker. Someone should have mentioned that at some point. Look, of course, the Corbyn legacy is one that split his party, not least, and whatever you think, whether the anti-Semitism allegations are fair or unfair, Starmer has had to spend a good deal of time putting the house in order. And plainly, it's obvious the Jewish community felt that there was an element of anti-Semitism, rightly or wrongly, in the Labour Party as it was under Corbyn, and Starmer's had to do a good deal of repair to that relationship. Because that's one thing that unambiguously happened at the last election, that people, the Jewish community would once have been split in the way that it votes much more than it was in 2019 against the Labour Party under Corbyn. I just wanted to make a different point there, because I'm quite conscious we haven't answered your exam question as to whether or not the Labour Party would be better for Britain, or at least I haven't. I unambiguously think that it would be bad for the country. I am as sure as Wednesday follows Tuesday that a Britain governed by Keir Starmer and co would be worse for Britain, even on the criticisms that Aaron makes, even if I conceded all of those. Not least because, to my mind, Blair was a centrist by inclination. Starmer is currently a bit of a centrist because you can see he's been told to be, he needs to be in order to win the election. It's not in his DNA, it's not in his core instincts. He's actually, I think, quite a bit more left-wing than his current persona suggests.
But I mean, I'll be interested to see the turnout at the next general election, because I think people, I'm trying to kill a fly there in case you're wondering what I was just doing with
fruit
that.
Flies
Yeah, I know,
in the studio.
I was trying to be really discreet and then I realised that my hand was on the screen, so I don't have a nervous twitch. There was just a fly that landed and I was trying to get it and I failed. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see the turnout at the next general election.
Don't knows equals don't turn out and don't vote, and the turnout is the biggest threat to the Conservative Party.
I don't think I would. I say this all the time. People get really angry with me. They don't think I should be in a position where I'm saying this, but I'm not sure that if there was a general election tomorrow, I wouldn't turn out to vote.
I completely disagree with that. No matter.
Loads of people do. They'll be getting in touch and telling me off.
No matter which way you vote, you should vote. And if you really feel like you cannot vote for any of the answers on the ballot paper, at least register your discontent and spoil your ballot. You will at least have shown that you are there.
They don't care. Well, they don't sit there and go, I've had 1,000 penises drawn on this, so I better up my game.
They don't care if there's 10. They don't care if there's 100. But if over time there's 1,000 votes in every constituency where people are spoiling their ballots, people will sense there's room in the political spectrum for a different appetite. That's what I mean. I give an unpopular opinion. I'm quite a good deal more sympathetic to the Australian position of compulsory voting than most people, but only if you can say none of the above.
Yeah, see, we have...
We agree on that. There you go.
There you go. We managed to find a point of agreement between these two before we got to the end. I haven't got time to register my frustration with that. I just... Oh, yeah, you'd have to drag me there by my fingertips, I think, if you tried to enforce compulsory voting. Do you reckon that is the answer? And by the way, what a sorry state of affairs within politics if the only way that you can get people to engage with you as a politician is by forcing them to do so. I think MPs need to have a long, hard look in the mirror and ask themselves, why would so many people perhaps not turn out at the next election? Now I want to talk to you about banks. We have been massively ripped off when it comes to the interest rates not being passed on. Should there be a windfall tax on the banks or not?
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry alongside me, Alex Dean and Aaron Bastani remain. You guys have been getting in contact about whether or not you think Labour are the answer at the next election. Graham says the most pressing issues in this country are the nanny state interference and enormous taxes, and you don't see that Labour Party would address that anytime soon. Dawn says in Wales there are many of us who cannot wait to see the back of Labour. She says our services here are falling apart, and she urges people to be careful what they wish for. Bernard says more Labour voters dislike Starmer even more than they did Jeremy Corbyn. And one of you, Bernard, again, I think it's you, saying, Michelle, you're a hypocrite. You ran for office, so how can you sit there now and say you would not vote? Well, I ran for office because I believe that there should be someone better representing my hometown in Parliament, and I believed I was that person. That is very different, though, to me not running and actually looking at what's on offer and engaging with them.
But it won't get better if you don't take part, Michelle.
Well, yes, but on the occasions that I have taken part, I sit there and I look at it and I think, what is this shower?
Yeah, but what you did was go all the way to 100, and you don't have. There are options between 0, not voting, not doing anything, and 100. You can just vote, and that is paying your little widow's mite. It's contributing to society and saying, I am part of the main. And I think it's very important you do that.
Well, then it's on the job of all of the politicos to convince me then to
no, it's
get
not.
me.
It's on sorry, I know you want to move on, but it's on all of us to play our part. It's not on their. It's not their responsibility to convince us. We should feel that democratic duty. It's part of our place in society to do that.
I don't feel that democratic duty. Sorry, I know I should. And I know that lots of you at home will be cheering Alex on, saying, yeah, you tell her, Alex. People died for her right to vote. And all
did.
The rest. Yes,
they did.
People died for my right to vote, not to make it compulsory to force me to vote, and there is a difference.
But you make a farce of that if you then say, I'm not going to bother. You did all of that. Do you know what? You've won me this right, and I'm not going to exercise it.
I will
it's not
have
just
the
having the
choice
right,
as to whether or not to exercise it, and that is a free society. That is a democracy. I maintain my position. If the politicians want my vote, want me to turn out and people like me, do better. Do better. When you get elected, actually deliver what you say you will deliver, positively impact communities and societies, then guess what? I might turn out and give you my cross in the box. But you know what? I've discussed this before. Yeah. They're on your side at home,
yes,
Alex.
Because your channel is watched by sensible, good, right-thinking people.
Yeah, well, I'm a northerner with thick skin and I can handle it. So, yes, I hear you at home and I hear you, Alex, but you've not convinced me. So let's move on. Let's talk banks, shall we? We all know that by now they're not behaving in the way that they should be when it comes to interest rates. If you've got a mortgage within nanoseconds of the rate changing, the base rate changing, you'll get a text saying your rate has been affected. If you've got savings, you will not get that feedback as quick. The banks are coining it in, eye-watering profits. In some countries, i.e. Italy, They were very quick recently, I think it was yesterday, today. They imposed a windfall tax, 40% on the banks. They saw the impact, the potential impact, the share prices of the banks dropping, and they watered it down a little bit. But notwithstanding that, I think there is an interesting case to be made for a windfall tax on banks. Do you agree?
I don't. And I don't think they just watered it down a little bit. I think the Italians basically reversed it. What you do to your financial markets and your institutions in a country, if you start imposing that sort of thing, is you tell the international investor community, look elsewhere, and you will harm your foreign direct investment opportunities quite significantly if you start doing that. I actually think that our banks get quite a bad rap. It's very, because, you know, at the moment they're the kind of victims du jour. Society swoops on. Once it would have been, I don't know, estate agents or something, and now the people you can beat up on with no cost or harm are banks. But our banks have returned the change in interest to their savers more quickly than banks in Germany or France and so forth. The UK is well ahead of the international curve in that. And we've imposed a huge number of duties on our banks, not just in the widely covered discussion about PEPs and so forth and knowing your customer reviews, but in their liquidity and stability requirements. They're obliged to keep a good deal more of their cash so that they can demonstrate they can pay out if they need to, if the event arises. So they can lend a lot less. And the other thing that's happened with our banks is that they get fined now, even if they've done nothing wrong, but if they can't demonstrate they've got enough systems in place to prevent somebody potentially doing something wrong. If you add all of that up, it comes to a sector that's very heavily regulated. And if you start imposing windfall taxes as well, you'll get to the point in the end where our banks aren't fit for purpose for staying alive into the future. The most important thing about a banking sector is that there's a plurality of providers and that the institutions carry on. You shouldn't object to them making a bit of a profit sometimes, because they should be robust enough to go through bad times too. And if you deny them the income now, they won't make it later.
I'm a capitalist, by the way, so I don't deny anyone's profit, but I do think there becomes a point in life when actually you're not making profit on your endeavours. You're making profit on circumstances outside of your control, and you're doing so by what I would call ripping off a lot of your customers on your savings rate.
But the other thing about that, though, is that might be a fair accusation if people still had really high mortgage rates and ultra-low savings rates. We've moved it up more significantly than our international peers on the savings. But some of our financial institutions have cut mortgage rate offers twice in a single week. Our banking sector and our mortgage providers is a really responsive sector.
I've got so much to say about this. You said about the bad times, Alex. We had the bad times. We bailed them out. The taxpayer bailed them out.
We'll make a profit on that.
No, I know, but I appreciate that. But there's a give and take here, isn't there? So you can't say, well, in the bad times they need profits to prop them up, because in the bad times the taxpayer propped them up and now they're screwing the taxpayer. So if we look at the numbers, and you've said about, you know, certain changes, let's look at this specifically. I have a savings product with Lloyds, just one savings product. The interest rate on that is 1%. 1%. Lloyds pre-tax profits up 46%. Something very strange is happening.
But that's consumer choice, though, because there are savings rates that are higher than 1%. So you should be a better consumer.
So let's look at rate. That's absolutely true. So let's look at this. Average mortgage rate right now 6.47%. Average Easy Saver Access, which is most people, not high interest ISA or whatever, 2.45%. So there's a huge margin being made there. HSBC announced £17 billion profits for the first 6 months of this year.
So
hold on, I didn't say a single word when you spoke, by the way. So we're seeing massive profits being made by banks here. A windfall tax is not to collect money, and that's a really important thing here. So this is not like with the North Sea oil and gas. This is not about making money for government. What the Italian government tried to do, and I agree it's not really worked out very well, but I think the motive and the intention is very noble. They're trying to disincentivise profiteering by banks here, trying to cream off a lot of gains.
But a windfall tax is exactly to collect money. You're saying it's not to collect money. That's exactly what it is.
Well, it wasn't. It was going to collect around €2 billion, which is a lot of money, but it's not a game changer for any treasury. The point was to get a better deal for Italians, and even the Foreign Secretary over there, the Foreign Minister Tajani, said this very well. He said, "We aren't attacking banks. We're protecting families." And I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. Why are mortgages a good 4% higher than savings rates? It's a really big question. And it's something that Jeremy Hunt said. Jeremy Hunt said this is not acceptable. So even the Tory government is saying this is a problem. The point is, how do we address it?
The Italian banking sector is one of the most unstable in the whole of Europe. Monte dei Paschi di Siena threatened to drag in the rest of their economy when it was wobbly. The idea the Italians can go around taking lumps off of their banks and say it's only 2 billion euros, when people have proven already less interested in investing in that market than many others as a result of government intervention, I think is for the birds.
Well, they're 600 years old, that bank, so I think they know a thing or two about banking, Alex. They were around a long time before you and me.
Just so we're clear, you think that's a good bank?
I don't think it's a good bank. I said the Italian... No, I said it's the oldest bank in Europe, and they have the oldest and most august banking
in the world
sector in Europe.
Yeah, and it was a terrible bank.
Why are you
so was RBS. That doesn't mean that all British banks are terrible banks.
No, but of course what happened with RBS and what happened with NatWest, with our 38%, I think, ownership now, which I think you concede, we're going to make a profit on that.
Yeah, but hang on, are we? Because I thought when we sold our last tranche of NatWest shares, I thought we offloaded those shares for something like half the value that we paid.
You've got to look at the whole transaction, not just one period of time. We're doing, I mean, obviously NatWest, as you may know on GB News, NatWest hit a little bump in the road of late.
Have mentioned that once or twice.
But notwithstanding that, they're just doing a big share buyback. Their share price has held up remarkably well. In fact, they've had a bit of an uptick this week. The taxpayer will make money on an intervention on RBS NatWest.
Can we record him saying that? And in a couple of years, when is it? Well, I think their deadline to be fully exited from NatWest is something like, it's either 2026 or 2027.
I look forward to returning to GB News and eating my hat or gloating.
Yeah,
I think you'll only invite me if it's eating the hat territory, won't you?
Yeah, I want to record that.
There's no downside there, is there?
Do you share his confidence, Alex's confidence, by the way, on that particular front in terms of us as taxpayers generating a healthy profit on our bailouts from the banks? I am not as optimistic as Alex is. And also over in Italy, we just mentioned that 40% tax that they have now wobbled on, to put it mildly, because the banks said it would have something like a substantially negative impact on them. Well, surely they must have known that. That was the intention, to have a negative impact on their profit, wasn't it? So then why do politicians change their position? Why don't they stand by what they're trying to achieve, have some kahunas about them? You get in touch and tell me your thoughts on all of that. It's getting hot in here, isn't it? I was going to sing that, but I can't sing, so I won't. Instead, we'll switch and we'll look at the weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. It is briefly warmer, temperatures reaching mid to high 20s, plenty of sunny spells. But there will be some rain moving into the far west later on Thursday. Looking at the bigger picture, a brief spell of warmer weather, but into the weekend, this area of low pressure starts to move in, introduces something a little bit fresher, particularly across the north and the west. So looking at the end of Wednesday, still some cloud across western areas, a bit murky around some coast, but plenty of clear spells taking us into the early hours and most places dry. Quite a warm night to come though, temperatures for most holding up around 15, 16 degrees, perhaps one or two spots no lower than 17 or 18 Celsius. For most Thursday morning, it's a bright start, plenty of sunny spells. There'll be some low cloud that takes its time to lift and break, and then the day ahead looking fine and dry for many, though the cloud does start to increase across the far west. By the end of the day, perhaps one or two showers developing over the higher ground of Wales, and temperatures lifting 27, 28, possibly even 29 Celsius. We've not seen these numbers for quite some time, so quite a warm feeling day. Into Friday though, a weak weather front pushes its way east across the country first thing, introducing then slightly fresher conditions into the afternoon, a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers. Some of these showers could be heavy towards the northwest of the UK, and temperatures still around 25 or 26 towards the southeast, but fresher into the weekend.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
I should have been listening to that weather because I do actually want to know whether or not it is going to get sunny, but instead I was still carrying on the conversation with these two about the banks. I was all distracted, so I do hope the weather is getting better. Mark says, Michelle, what is the point in a business if they cannot make a profit? Yes, of course, Mark, but the question is, in times of non-endeavour by the bank, if you're creaming it in basically with nothing to do with what you're actually doing, but circumstances outside of your control, should there be a cap on it? Stuart says, why should this money be going back into the government? I think the plan would be, Stuart, if you do windfall tax, you would give it, I don't know, in some kind of mortgage relief or something back to homeowners. Joseph says, definitely yes, windfall tax to all of the banks. Ian, again, you're saying, what is the point in this? It'll just fall into the coffers of the Inland Revenue. No, the argument would be it would go back to homeowners. Mike says, no, do not windfall tax. Why don't you just encourage them to give excessive profits to the account holders and their savings. Well, I think there's building societies already that are handing out some of their profits to their customers. Now, very important topic I want to address with you in a couple of minutes. Social media. Do you think it is a scourge on society? I definitely do. If you disagree with me, tell me why.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry till 7 o'clock. PR consultant Alex Dean alongside me and the founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. A few of you saying you are spot on, Aaron. A couple of people say, I can't believe it. I'm finding myself agreeing with Aaron. What is going on? Lots of you agreeing with Alex in terms of compulsory voting. Very unhappy with me saying I perhaps wouldn't vote, but I found one. I found a friend, Steve. You say, I'm with you, Dewbs. Not voting is a type of voting, and it shows the politicians what a shambles they're making of it. Me and you, Steve, we can be best friends because no one else agrees with us. Anyway, I need to move on to my next topic. He was doing an intake of breath, ready to go at me again.
Kind of voting.
Yeah,
it's obviously not.
Steve, me and you, we know what we're doing, don't we, Steve? Right? Let's talk social media, shall we? Because I basically cannot help it, but I actually feel that social media is a monumental scourge on society, right? And it wasn't helped my view when I saw today scores of police having to line the streets outside of various retail shops, places such as JD Sports, because absolute pillocks have gone online, places like TikTok and all the rest of it, encouraging people to come together and take part in organised looting. I really feel, Alex, that social media has done more harm harm to society, then good.
What's that? And none of the social media channels you have mentioned made those people go and do that. It was their own stupidity and desire to do it that meant they did that. I mean, you can have a knife and fork, but I don't think you're going to stab me. It's not the knife or the fork that meant you stabbed me. It's if you did stab me, it was your own desire to. And these things are tools, and actually these tools I think are extremely useful. I happen to think that social media has a remarkable democratising influence on society. I think it's really good for society to be able to express yourself and to be listened to and heard. Until recently, it may seem strange to say this on a TV channel, the only way people got to communicate, to listen, was sort of top down, was broadcasts from their masters, from their betters, saying you should do this or this is what we think. And there was no real, aside from a letter to the editor or something, opportunity to express yourself back. Now, society is much more peer-driven, communication between others, and you can find people of like mind, including with the most obscure interests that you would not otherwise have found, and willing to go as deep as you like into any corner of humanity's activities. Social media has enabled people who would once have sat lonely, not knowing others thought as they did, cared as they did, felt as they did, believed as they did, and identify with them and find a new route to socialising. I think it's great.
I think it's a cesspit. Aaron, your thoughts?
I agree with some of the things Alex said, and I think what's important to note here is that you're not a net native like me, so you can remember the period before the internet, and I think we've got a bit of a unique perspective on this. I think for people who've known nothing else, who've grown up within it, I think it's a bit different. If you look at, for instance, rates of depression, anxiety, the CDC in the United States, really phenomenal data on this earlier on this year, 57% of teenage girls basically feel depressed, hopeless, listless, sad, up from 36% 10 years ago. That's not TikTok like we're talking here, that's Instagram. And I do think things like Instagram, what they're doing to the body image of young women in particular, it's terrifying. And I think on smartphones, that's slightly diverging from social media.
TikTok plays a massive role in that.
It does as well, but I think Instagram is kind of, for me, and maybe that shows my age, maybe TikTok's filling in for Instagram, but amongst the age cohorts I'm familiar with, it's terrifying. I see younger kids now, they don't watch films or even shows, they're literally scrolling through YouTube Shorts. What that's doing to their attention span, their capacity to learn. We're raising entire generations now who think addiction is normal. Addiction's good. And look, I'm not immune from this, right? I also have a little bit of a Twitter addiction, as anybody knows who follows me. So I think there are very good aspects to all of this, but I also think there are some big downsides, and I think we do need to work out different norms, different conventions, and even start legislating differently for some things.
Most of these objections arose with equal force when television was invented. People are addicted to television. TV violence is encouraging people to do things they wouldn't otherwise do. Look at these horror films and taking the name of our Lord in vain. And Satanism's on the rise because of TV, and TV encourages or glorifies violence or objectifies people. These are things that all mass media have said. People have said about mass media, rather. I suppose the difference is now people are their own content creators much more, which I think is also quite empowering, and they're also their content selectors much more. It's much better to have the plurality we have with media it is today than have 2, 3, 4 channels dictating all the things that you can absorb or enjoy. I would rather people had the freedom to scroll through videos than only have 3 or 4 state-sanctioned broadcasters, which was the alternative when I was growing up.
See, I'm interested about what you think about this at home. Do you think it has benefited society, social media? If I never had to use Twitter or anything like that ever again, I would not care one jot. I feel like I have to engage to some degree because of the job that I do. And you mentioned that you're addicted. For example, on Twitter or X or whatever it's called, I don't think anyone should be allowed to be anonymous. I think there should be no anonymous accounts, and therefore you can operate the way you want. So you can abuse whoever you want if that's your stock in trade, but you've got to be accountable. Yeah. Put your name, put your face, and then see how you behave on social media. So perhaps if you got rid of anonymity, I might like it a little bit more.
People who wanted to express views that were outside their religion's conservative perspective, or their parents' views, or the perspective of their employers, you wouldn't want them to have a voice in the media.
Well, there's 2 different ways you could do that. So, for example, you could still have an authorised account, so you have to say who you are, you have to get validated and verified, and then you can present differently online. So, for example, I don't know, you could identify as a female called Sharon.
So Twitter would know.
Yes, so Twitter, it would be a verified account. So if you were doing anything illegal, if you were doing harassment or whatever like that, there would be a way that I could hold you accountable, and that would tick both boxes.
That sounds really nice. I bear in mind that the Electoral Commission and the Police Service Northern Ireland have both been hacked and lost consumer data, individuals' data, quite personal material this week. When Twitter is hacked and it reveals the people who've been hiding behind the reassurance you give, and they're religious bigots who they were trying to avoid, or their parents who disapprove of their life choices, suddenly learn who they are.
But I bet the amount of people on social media that are doing what you say versus the amount of people that are abusing it and using it as a tool to harass, bully, and all the rest of it. I bet there's a clear margin.
The trouble is to give some people protection. To give some people protection, you need all people to have protection. Their freedom of speech is your freedom.
But you can say that about WhatsApp, right? People who are in that exact category, I agree with you. It's a very important point. They're having private communications with people saying things that aren't particularly flattering about their faith or their family or their friends or whoever. That could get hacked. So, like, the idea that anybody, if you write something down, it can get hacked. So I don't think that's quite true. I want to just quickly say as well...
We use the word hack loosely because often it's user error, so it's not a sophisticated cyberplot. It's some idiot that's left this. Anyway, I've been told off 3 times in my ear that I have to go to a break, but I'm enjoying the conversation, so I wasn't listening. But I do need to listen.
Sorry,
I know. No, it's interesting, and I want to hear your views at home. Social media, that, if you ask me, is one of the reasons that so many people now say that they are trans, and all of this ideology and all the rest of it. If you are someone that believes in biological sex and the realities of it, and you campaign to that end, are you akin to a racist or a white supremacist? You tell me.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Alex Dean and Aaron Bastani still alongside me now. Adam says, Michelle, I'm not on social media. Am I missing out? No, Adam, you are not. And I bet you are a damn sight happier for not being on it. Do not venture to the dark side. That is my advice to you. Now, the SNP Deputy Westminster leader, Mary Black, she has claimed that gender-critical campaigners are comparable to racist. I found this whole notion of gender-critical, I don't even like that concept anyway, because to me it's just people that believe that biological sex is real. You've now got to have this daft label applied to you. But anyway, what do you make to some of her comments, Alex?
It's absurd, and I suppose it's because Ms Black has said she no longer wishes to face the electorate and is standing down as an MP, that she feels like she's sort of, off the hook and she can say whatever she likes. But it turns out, I think, whatever she likes is beyond the pale for most voters. And the people, the party she's now, or at least the party for which she's been elected and is now no longer going to be elected, will not thank her for this, because, of course, it was the cause of trying to send a male rapist to a female prison that, at its heart, undid Nicola Sturgeon's stand. People said, I believe in Scottish nationalism, I believe in supporting you for independence, but there are certain things beyond which I won't go. And trying to send somebody who's still got a penis to a female prison who's been convicted of rape is one of them. And suggesting that people who think there are two genders, two sexes, is not are bigots of some kind or racist. It's not just wrong, it'll alienate a good number of the right-thinking, sensible people who might otherwise have been willing to put their cross in the SNP's box.
Ron?
I think, well, she didn't even say they were bigots. She said they were white supremacists, right? It's one thing to say somebody's a bigot. I find it interesting and strange that this kind of just eliding all these things and making them somehow...
I don't think she did use the word white supremacist.
Did she not?
I think she very strongly hinted at that.
Right, well, I've seen those words, so I found that quite outlandish. I mean, you can find something disagreeable without, relating it to something which is unrelated. She did make some things which are incontrovertibly true, big money coming over from the US on this agenda. And also, I think what she's trying to get at, if I'm being charitable, is that there's a certain amount of dehumanising in this debate, from a number of sides, by the way. But on the substantial point being made, I don't agree with her, no.
She goes on to say things like, if you're not educating yourself into things, then you can't complain when people from a minority say you're not treating us right. She goes on to say that's exactly what's happening with the trans community. But I reject this notion that if you just have this view, I would say it's quite a normal-minded view that you believe in biological sex. This whole notion that you've just got to re-educate yourself and keep going educating yourself until you reach that point of view, that is for the birds, if you ask me. Listen, there's a lot of doom and gloom in this world, so I do just want to, very quickly before the end of the show, I want to just highlight something that really warmed my cockles today, so it did. This little boy, a little 8-year-old boy that many of us might be familiar with, he had to have both of his legs amputated when he was abused by his parents as a little baby. Tony Hudgell is a little boy that I reference. Well, I've got goosebumps on my arms. He's walked to the summit of a Lake District mountain. He's raised more than £35,000 for charity. His target, bless him, his original target, it was only 500 quid. And I just want to bring this story up because I think that we exist in a society where everyone wants to be a victim and everyone feels badly done to and woe is me. And this little boy, Aaron, every time I see him, it makes me just swell with pride. I don't even know him. And I found it so inspirational. He's lost his legs and he's going up mountains and all the rest of it. It's so nice.
It's wonderful. It's great. It's a great sort of allegory as well, right? I mean, anything's possible. His life is a miracle. God bless him.
Yeah, indeed.
And if you wanted to support him, the QR code is available on the screen.
Oh, yes, there you go. You should get a job at GBNews because I got so into him that I forgot to tell you that if indeed you are like me and you are inspired by him, you can donate to his thing. And I think it feels like every week, every month these days, we hear these awful stories about these absolute disgusting animals that abuse their own children. And to see little Tony there doing well, honestly, it warms my heart. Lots of you divided on some of the topics that we've been discussing tonight, which is exactly the way that I like it, because the world would be very, very boring, wouldn't it, if we all agreed on absolutely everything. I like the confusion that people find themselves in when they find themselves agreeing with you, Aaron. I do. It makes me laugh. And Adele, we were talking about tool makers and whether or not Keir Starmer, his dad was a tool maker, and Adele says he definitely was a tool maker. After all, he made the biggest tool that there is. I'll leave you to ponder what she means. But for now, look, that's all I've got time for. Aaron, Alex, thank you very much for your company. Thank you very much at home for yours too. Do not go anywhere. If you're sitting there, you're thinking, shall I go out now? No, what you're doing. Nigel Farage is up next. You don't want to miss that, so have a good night, and I will see you tomorrow night.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. It is briefly warmer, temperatures reaching mid to high 20s, plenty of sunny spells. But there will be some rain moving into the far west later on Thursday. Looking at the bigger picture, a brief spell of warmer weather, but into the weekend, this area of low pressure starts to move in, introduces something a little bit fresher, particularly across the north and the west. So looking at the end of Wednesday, still some cloud across western areas, a bit murky around some coast, but plenty of clear spells taking us into the early hours and most places dry. Quite a warm night to come though, temperatures for most holding up around 15, 16 degrees, perhaps one or two spots no lower than 17 or 18 Celsius. For most